So I will just welcome all of you here, and for the sake of the recording, to the session on networking the networks, legal and social models for multi-level organizing in the commons. We are wrapping up day one of the Open Future Forum, and today's theme has been around civic infrastructure, but also obviously a lot of our conversations cross-span themes and are about the weaving function between sort of verticals and areas of focus and guilds, as it were. And one of the weaving functions for us has been the governance that we have to sort of reimagine, retrofit, and innovate forward in order to lean into this concept of radical collaboration, of genuinely belonging to each other, and in any way emerging with some sort of participatory commons. An idea that is sort of not like the way that people prescribe commons, as in like the resources that belong to those who are takers, the commons, right? But the commons, the like actual value of the living world that we're all in service to and stewardship of, that we all benefit from and therefore have a responsibility to. The commons, that is the overlapping common interest that we are all bound by, and the common future that we are all in service to and actively creating with our choices now, and what kind of ancestors we are to the next generation. So commons is a really rich and dynamic word that I look forward to exploring, let alone how the heck do we steward the commons with so much complexity and dynamic diversity, let alone how would we even begin to approach the legal and fiscal governance models that govern the commons, when what we're really aiming for is a new social understanding of stewardship and what that means. Like, what do we mean by govern? What does agency even mean? You know, like these concepts of these frameworks of anything of governance, I think that itself deserves the opportunity to retrofit and reimagine what we mean by governing. But what's true is we live within the constraints of legal fiscal responsibility and the challenges of some of these incredible social intents to be more interoperable and compatible with each other and to cooperate and help each other. We kind of buffer up against some of the constraints of the legal considerations and the financial considerations, and then the social considerations of being human, wonderfully messy, radically wild and still maturing humans. So there's a lot here that I'm really excited to actually open up for the conversation today. And what we've invited into the space are obviously all of you as attendees and participants and global citizens, but also several of you that represent networks. And part of what our work at Open Future Coalition is to help grow an ecosystem that really can be compatible and or interoperable. And I use those slightly differently because to be interoperable to me is a deep level of trust, where you're actually mutually invested in each other and you genuinely are interdependent, and your vitality and ability to flourish genuinely depends on the other. And that requires a level of trust and cultivation that takes time, like all relationships of meaning. Yet compatible at least gets us, it's like the difference between like sustainable and regenerative. Compatible, you know, compatible organizing models and principles at least get us in sort of the realm of the ability to sort of be complementary and find ways to ease our way into something that may be truly interoperable over time. You don't always just jump right in. Sometimes relationships take cultivation, but I do believe that represented in this room and certainly in the partnerships that we've been cultivating, there is a lot of surface area for really actualizing this idea of complementary and compatible and even potentially interoperable and interdependent operating models for these networks, for these communities of gathering that are happening, whether it's communities based in place, purpose, or practice. For us, it's just this idea of how do we better create the right protocols, patterns, infrastructures, processes, and how do we align ourselves to be able to cross weave all of this incredible rich sort of network building that's really accelerating, and allow for the diversity of these different ways of organizing ourselves, these different types of thematic networks or these different geographical intents. But really at the heart of it, what are those sort of stacked and complementary patterns that allow us to exchange value together and to mutually resource and to honor what we're each sort of outreaching towards or who we're cultivating relationships with, and acknowledge that diversity in a healthy ecosystem is relevant. And so is compatibility and mutual nourishing. So I really appreciate living systems as a framework that gets us a bit out of the human realms and the constructs and challenges of human realms. I, as a living system geek, believe that living in to how we become a living system, not just modeling or biomimicking living systems, saying, oh, living systems over there, yeah, ecosystems, how do they function well together with all this diversity and all these dynamic interactions and relationships? I'm more interested in becoming a living system and learning and modeling together what that is to really embody a living system operating for the mutual flourishing and co-resourcing and honestly co-liberation of all of our efforts towards a greater common good. So that's the framing for the conversation today, is an opportunity and invitation to ask a few curated voices, but then open it up to all of you here to dive a little under the surface around what does it take to really steward the commons and network the networks. And certainly the conversation is about maybe specific examples or models of legal, fiscal, or social governance that helps us sort of find the way to dockport into each other's bodies of work and effort. But I'm also going to open up the invitation to get a little underneath that even, because even those constructs deserve our radical reimagining. So yes, we should look at how do we work within the existing functions and constraints and needs that are very real. But I would also invite, as we're looking into direct models and solutions for some of these legal, fiscal, and social governing patterns, I welcome us also to get underneath that to what has to shift to allow us to sort of transition from the existing constraints or models or ways of organizing to what's possible. And the one last invitation I'll make is not necessarily to make a radical leap to bypass the fact that we do have to make a transitory, we have to transition towards this sort of new paradigm. It's a process. And so what is sort of the underlying constraints that need to be released and absolved and transformed? What are the practical models and examples of legal, fiscal, governance structures and ways of collaborating and coordinating together to connect these networks of change? And then what does it look like? What are we moving towards? Like, what's the higher aim and intent and goal and invitation about the why we are striving to want to be compatible and interoperable together? That's like what's compelling us forward and what would that look like? So that's the body of conversation today. It's really rich and dynamic. I welcome all of you who are just joining us into the space and those who spent all day with us. And I'm going to call on a couple of names first. But first, I'll just introduce that represented here. We have a few different people. I'm going to name them so you can wave and say hi. And then I think I just want to open up into a roundtable. I think rather than going person by person, I'd like at least everybody that we curated to take a chance and jump in and share your perspectives, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the community. But I do want to call on you. So the folks that we're going to be hearing from today are Lauren Archer from Kinship Earth and Stephen Gomes from Kinship Earth, Haifa, Seeds, all sorts of fun things. I have Reiki here, also from Haifa and Region Civics Alliance. I have Kayala here from the Collaborative Tech Alliance, Elizabeth Harold from Water Unity Network. Let's see, who else do we have here? Donna Nelham from Unstitution. I have Elliot Bayev from Global Unity. My sweet friend Faith Flannigan from Buckminster Fuller Institute. Jordan Sukkett from Lionsburg. Let's see who else is in the space today. I think we have some Prosocial folks. Let's see. Jake Kelly with Hot Planet Repair and Our Planet Our Future is working on some of this. I think those are who I have in this space now. I don't see my Prosocial friends. They were on with us earlier. Just because I didn't name you, we will have an opportunity for everyone to jump in. I think I'm going to start first. I'm going to start with Faith. Faith, we haven't seen much of you today. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to jump in, but I'd love if everybody I just named, just in a roundtable, feel the right energy of who goes next. But I would love for you to share your perspectives on this conversation.
Well, I just jumped in, so I appreciate you calling on me first, just to jolt me out of where I just was. I was just at leading TrimTab Space Camp, which is our course on systems thinking and moving to a climate safe future. So I would say in terms of systems change and systems thinking and how we collaborate better, I think there are a multitude of people on this call that have current systems and programs and platforms in place that we can learn from and with. Yeah, I just sent you a note, Jamaica. So
Hold on. Face like, I don't know if I'm ready to go first. And I put her right on the spot and in the fire.
I was like, oh. But we've been working on something called the Cooperating Manual for Spaceship Earth, which is, I just told Jamaica, it's on hold for the moment. We have a potential new executive director coming in and are just currently auditing what's working, what's not working within our system. So really taking a step back to look at our whole infrastructure and ecosystem and see what are the systems that need to be in place, and who of you on this call and in this community are already putting together this collaborative, platform and wiki that we can use for all of our programs. I just got off a call for one of our other programs, and the chat was so full of resources, really deep, rich resources. And so the question that we held and continue to hold is, how do we provide kind of a infrastructure for holding these high integrity resources that we can share to policymakers, or people that are working, the key people that are making decisions in the field, generalists, and all of our community at large. So I would just say, I was totally called on the spot to just making that call out. So I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you for calling on me.
Yeah, thanks, Faith. Sorry I didn't see your chat, but really glad to have you here. And maybe just before you go, even with Buckminster Fuller, you've been at the helm of supporting a legacy network, really. And so just any other thoughts about sort of who's actively, like, tell us a little bit about your network for those who don't know Buckminster Fuller, and sort of what's really alive in the community that you're stewarding. And then we can kind of go on from there.
Yeah, I love that impetus. And I've seen a couple of people. I've seen Brad here. I've seen Kevin. I've seen Kayala. That are part of our community and our network, and many of you as well, that I don't know if I'm able to see your faces or not, but we have a community of over 20,000 people that are a part or listening in or having an ear to what BFI has been doing and has done over the last 40 years. And so the community kind of holds this connection and this thread through what are the principles that Buckminster Fuller stood for and held dear. And our goal and our kind of legacy today is, my husband, is how do we actually live into those principles in all of our actions, and how do we build and create a world that works for 100% of life through our connected tissue and our collaborative efforts.
Thank you so much, Faith. Yeah, and even just you being here and representing, I think a lot of us have such respect for Buckminster Fuller, his work, and how he was well before his time, almost leaving us these codes to follow. And now you and others have carried on that work of how do we bring that into the current moment, and what do we build towards the future together. So thank you for sharing a bit about your work, and feel free just to sort of relax into this space and jump in as it feels organic. But I am glad to have you with us today. I think I'm going to hand that over to Lauren from Kinship Earth. And then I'll segue also to Stephen, because you both sort of are connected to Kinship Earth. But I'd love for you to kick us off with some of your perspectives about this rich conversation of both how do we network networks, legal social governance models, but really something deeper than that, isn't it? Please go ahead, Lauren. I welcome your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you so much, Jamaica and Caitlin and the whole team at Open Future Coalition. We are delighted to partner with you. Here at Kinship Earth, we have basically inherited legacy networks. So our founder, one of our founders, Stephen Gomes is one of the founders. Our work is based on the legacy of Susan Davis Mora, who founded what was called KINS Innovation Networks. And these are networks of highly conscious people that are principled and work with specifically the principles of radical collaboration. And so I came into this position a few years ago, and the networks have been in existence separately. And our task initially is to bring them together with one global network. And of course, the question that I asked is, well, then what do I do with them when I get them? And the Open Impact platform is giving us the capacity to be able to have a centrally located place instead of bringing people into a mighty networks where it's like, okay, we're going to hold you all to ourselves and keep you here together. That doesn't serve the collective, that doesn't serve the commons. And so so part of what we're doing is weaving introductions across the network over time. And I think that's an important piece here. And that's what I'm witnessing, why I'm showing up today, why I'm showing up to a lot of these meetings, is because relationships take time to develop, and listening is a very important piece of the work that we're doing, and meeting one another and finding out who's already doing what within the ecosystem so that we're not duplicating efforts, so that we can leverage our relationships and our capacities for the highest good of all concerned. So I guess just a huge shout out and thank you for holding this space. And what we look forward to is, continuing participation. I'll put an invitation out. So kinshipearth.org. Please go ahead, sign up for our email list. We do regular events with really world-class leaders, many of them elders, in the environmental, social, and a lot of in the alternative finance kind of space. So we invite everyone here to participate, and then we look forward to connecting on the Open Impact platform. And I'll toss it over to Stephen if you have anything to add to that. Nope, you're muted, Stephen.
Thanks for having us here today. Really appreciate the effort you're doing, and we're very happy to be part of your initial beta testing of your platform. We have great hopes for that. We think it fits very well with our mission and goals. And when we get into the topic of networking networks, it's obviously a very complex and difficult to comprehend subject. But I will say this. If you look at nature, nature makes use of complex networks of feedback, automatic feedback mechanisms. And we, with a planet with 7 billion plus people, we're not going to be able to network networks without the use of very solid software AI support. And the key to networking networks is developing that kind of software so that we can, in fact, manage that kind of complexity without personally making decisions on every little thing that has to happen, because that's beyond our capacity. So we know that aspect of it. At taking off my Kinship Earth chairman hat, I'm also moderator of the Seeds Governance Working Group. And we're actually wrestling with this very thing right now. And there are not easy answers. And we're finding that they're not easy answers. And we already had Seeds 1.0 and Constitution 1.0, and we stumbled and we made mistakes and we lost trust of some of our network. We're struggling now through that whole process to discover what's a better way of doing it. How do we improve? How do we make it so that it works for a wider ecosystem? So we're right in the midst of that ourselves, and I'm looking forward to what I hear from the other panelists here. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you so much for that. I just, before we move on, I just want to note a couple of things. We're really thrilled to have formally partnered with Kinship Earth to model how, obviously, we have the Open Impact platform, and the Open Future Coalition is a network, and we're partners with so many of you, but it's been really wonderful to actually look at Kinship Earth as an example model that we can work with to imagine how we can grow the capacity of the Open Impact platform and what we do through the ecosystem and programming, et cetera, to sort of model a flourishing network that then we can sort of say, okay, now how does this start to intersect with all the other networks who are actively connected, whether you're on the platform with us or just part of our ecosystem. Network means a lot of things to us. It's a verb, it's a place, it's a collection of people. But I'm really excited about the prospect that we are prototyping. As I know, Tom Chi is one of the board members of Buckminster Fuller. This idea of rapid iteration and prototyping is a really essential way, because what you just said secondarily that I want to note, Stephen, is that this is this is a learning, and this is a learning community that's actively sort of engaged. Some of you maybe are just meeting, but many of you do know each other. And if you haven't yet met, this is definitely a shameless ploy to see about getting some surface area for you to meet, because many of you are, in my opinion, connecting in ways that you may or may not even understand yet. And so that practicing together, learning forward together, not being, being humble enough to what you just said, Stephen, to acknowledge, where do we try something and it isn't quite it? What did we learn? That is so valuable, because to pretend like any of us have it figured out is, audacity. Nobody's got it figured out. We're doing something which is literally the intelligence of the living world innervating itself through the collective consciousness of humanity, learning how to be a collective together in a more symbiotic way. It's literally happening in our own nervous systems, in our bodies, in our social bodies, and this is a learning process. So the more that we're honest about our learnings and discoveries and share that together, I think the quicker we can iterate and prototype based on that collective wisdom, experience, and knowledge to advance together, to like, oh, what didn't work? Okay, how do we improve? What did you do? Oh, wait, no, we tried this. Like, if we can be humble enough to be like, nobody's got it all sorted. What are we learning? I think that's the most radical way to forge this idea of more interoperable, compatible, connected networks, growing that collective consciousness actively through all of our efforts to convene and connect and host and make meaning together with all these people that we're stewarding and inviting. So thank you for naming that, Stephen. And with that, I think I'll hand over to Keala, who I think sometimes works behind the scenes, but has been one of the most networkers I've ever met. He's been a part of almost every single network possible, and in some ways holds a collective tissue between a lot of networks. So I'm going to throw Keala in the ring here and see what some of your thoughts are here.
Thanks so much, Jamaica. Yeah, well, and certainly the ultimate network, life, that is the one weaving through all, right? All of those. So happy to be here and put a few thoughts in to the mix. Jamaica and I, having been working in Village Lab from a while back, one of the explorations there that touches the heart of all this is the model of a participatory commons. And the method that over the last several years I've been engaged with the most is prototyping of that participatory commons pattern. And so they're all living systems patterns. And so when we talk about governance and financial things, there's like this really strong need for interoperability across systems rather than creating one that's dominating in any way. And so that's a really interesting aspect, but that's where the complexity of nature is the model to be able to look at. It's, life is a very complex system of systems and network of networks, all those patterns, and yet thriving when the conditions are right. So then the understanding of what are the right conditions for human systems to be reintegrated with living systems in a more wholesome way, then looking a lot at one of the reasons to find the others. Prosocial is a really inspiring set of patterns and ways of understanding human behavior that we're really inspired to explore, both in the context of the Collaborative Tech Alliance, which is one of the places where the commons pattern is being explored, especially also the prosocial patterns. And I see Jeff's on the call, so maybe he'll be sharing a little more on prosocial in a bit. But there's that aspect of really understanding what the underlying patterns are and knowing that trust is such a fundamental aspect of building relationships and building coherence. And then the reasons for, entering into the space around collaborative technology and the solutions there. I also have a strong background in permaculture as an approach to regenerative design. And in that space, we often look at, the principle that the solution is there in the problem. If we study the problem the right way, we'll figure it out, it's there. So kind of seeing the aspect of that within technology and technical systems, and also the competition between people developing and all those other, the sort of cultural DNA of the dominant worldview and the sort of oppression dynamics that we want to be able to shift out of into the more holistic models, which are both derived from or inspired of indigenous and ancient wisdom, but also have all the implications of systems science innovation as well. So there's a lot of that kind of ancient future patterning and a lot there, and then grounding it in the prototype so that we can have live feedback and go into some of the harder spaces too, which includes challenging feedback or, and not avoiding conflict essentially, which is one of the patterns that's important within the prosocial, the prosocial principles or patterns that are derived from Lynn Ostrom's work. But I think maybe I will just sort of drop it there into, and just pass it from there. Thanks so much.
Kala, thanks so much for that. And what's interesting that part of what you've brought up, just slightly touched on, but that I want to segue to before I hand it off to the next speaker, is even noticing in this particular conversation. Today's conversations have been wonderfully diverse and dynamic. We've had a global population represented from not only sort of, different places, but from different worldviews and cultural perspectives all day. And that's felt so good. I think that's been one of my greatest joys, is feeling the true like diversity and dynamic experiences that today's conversations have been filled with. What I notice, and I'm just going to say it, is that when we get to networking the networks, this network that kind of is starting to connect itself and see each other in a way that I celebrate and that I'm a champion of. I also notice where we're missing diversity. And there's other networks and other communities that are gathering and networking. With my work recently supporting a organization called If Not Us and Who, I've had the good fortune of starting to connect with some of these Indigenous and BIPOC networks who are organizing and gathering and building compatibility together, right? And it's almost like, even within that, there's still this divide or these constraints or these challenges. So like really finding out, how do we sort of, first there's like, where's our comfort zone of finding how we network the networks, but then where's that edge zone of how we dynamically really start not only sort of being an inclusive and welcoming space as networks starting to network with each other and growing and exponentiating the network, but actively seeking out partnership, accomplice, allyship, support, participation with other networks also networking, so that we don't end up sort of recreating a particular kind of myopic experience of our own worldview. And so it's not in any way shaming anything that I'm not actively complicit into, but I'm noticing it, that all of our sessions were really diverse. And this is the first session that I'm like, this is a little less diverse of worldview and perspectives, but I know those communities are out there because I'm starting to find the way to make those bridges and connections. So I'm gonna let that sort of interesting noticing be something I'm going to hand to our friend Jeff from Prosocial, who's dropped into space, and also Dounia, who didn't necessarily want to jump in and be a presenter, but I think that she might have some perspectives upon this as well. So I'm going to hand it to Prosocial for a moment and kind of drop that rich inquiry along with what we're talking about into your lap and see what comes from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's really good to be here. And in the spirit of noticing, I want to just share some things that I'm noticing that chances are you're probably noticing too. And that is that there, for anybody that's paying attention, seems to be an amplification of serendipity and synchronicity and meaningful coincidences that are happening. And they're happening at an increased pace, which means that there's something going on. There's maybe the beginning of what in chemistry might be referred to as a catalysis. And it has to do with networks and groups of groups kind of collaborating and cooperating together. And there seems to be possibly some impacts from the recent pandemic that may be changing human consciousness a bit. And some of the things that I've noticed is that because of the experience that we've gone through, there's three kind of fundamental things that have shifted in collective awareness. One is how fragile we are as a human species. Another thing is how interdependent we are on each other. We're not isolated, and we were all having a very common experience. And then the third thing, and maybe the most important thing, is the need for cooperation. because we realize with the existential crisis that we now face, the environmental crisis, nuclear war, both man-made, require human solutions. And those solutions cannot and will not happen without cooperation. But it has to be cooperation at scale. So we're, pro-social world, we're the new kids on the block. We've got more to learn than anything, really. And we are learning. We're trying to approach this with humility. The sense is that we're stewards of something that wants to take shape. And we're all part of that. And part of what seems to want to take shape is the emergence of a conscious superorganism, where all of the parts of humanity in service and stewardship of the whole world, not of just of the human species, it not only takes a village, it takes a world. And all the pieces have to communicate together. And so there's an enormous and significant social dimension of this, but there's also a technical dimension, because technology can be a facilitator of that. Teilhard de Chardin 50 years ago talked about, he's a paleontologist and Jesuit priest, but he was a visionary thinker as well. And he, coined the word, the noosphere, as this kind of collective conscience of humanity. And we're seeing more and more that he kind of threw a forward pass, and we're kind of now catching it. We see elements of the noosphere that are developing. And one of the things that we're seeing with Prosocial, which is a framework, it's not a panacea, it's not a one size fits all, it's a framework. And the framework, interestingly enough, isn't something that someone thought up. One of the things I love about it, Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, first woman to ever win the Nobel Prize in economics, was a researcher. And her and her husband, studied, and what they were most interested in is how groups and communities were able to avoid the tragedy of the commons. And the tragedy occurs when you have common pool resources and ungoverned competition. Because of greed and selfishness, it tanks the resource, thus the tragedy. But groups and communities all over the world with no connection with one another were able to avoid that tragedy in very similar ways. And she referred to those ways as the core design principles. And that's one of the foundations of kind of the pro-social framework. But it's something that we already knew, we're already doing as human civilization, but we've forgotten it. And so it's kind of like relearning it. And oftentimes with kind of fundamental truth, it's not like this mind-blowing idea. It's almost like when you hear it, it resonates with something inside, and it's like, I already knew that somehow. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why people are drawn to it, is because they already know it. We're social creatures. We know how to cooperate, but we just don't know we know how to cooperate. And what we're doing is we're learning how to cooperate, how to dock or dance collectively together. So I'll share just one example of what we're learning and how we're learning it. It's an initiative that is going on right now in Latin America. It's about a year into the initiative. And it started out, this is in support of the Templeton World Charity Foundation supported this initiative, has research and kind of experiential learning. And the idea was to start out with 4 of their grantees, organizations that they currently support, and explore, how working with them, how with the pro-social framework, the impact that it has in terms of the cultural evolution of those groups. Well, we went from 4 to 12, and these groups had never worked with each other before, and they're scattered out all over South America. And we experimented with a framework of working with groups of groups. So these organizations, large, significant organizations, began kind of working together with the framework around the first core design principle of prosocial, which is a shared identity and purpose. It's the cornerstone, because you have to have that in order to get cooperation at scale with the rest. And some of the interesting things that has come out of that experiment is they collaboratively, over a number of sessions, came up with 8 things that they all agreed to, that they aligned on. And I'll share with you what the first 2 things are, which is kind of interesting. The first one is that they all agreed that the established institution system isn't working and it has to change. So that's not earth-shattering, but it's interesting that that's what they notice, and that's the number 1 thing that they aligned on of these 8 things. But the second thing to me personally, is very interesting. And it is that there's a need for inner work, and that the source of cultural and institutional transformation requires inner work. And so I think why that's so interesting is that these are really diverse and often secular organizations, but they realize that this inner work impacts the outer work, that for outer change that requires inner change. So we're going to write up all this, but essentially what we believe is emerging here is a framework for working with groups of groups that's repeatable. You know, our emphasis has been previously working with a group, but the real action is working with groups of groups and ultimately networks of networks. That's how it becomes scalable. So thank you for the invitation.
I mean, thank you for your work, Jeff. Dounia, I'd love for you to add more. I know you have some programming coming up, and some here are familiar with Prosocial and some aren't. So any resources about Prosocial to allow others to kind of understand this set of principles is really valuable. And Eleanor's work is, like Buckminster Fuller, sort of a legacy body of work. But Dounia, did you want to add any other thoughts besides just the resources, just your own personal experiences and thoughts on that?
Thank you, Jamaica. Actually, I would love to invite anyone who feels comfortable to actually close our eyes and take a deep breath. I'm feeling very grateful to Jeff for mentioning inner work. It was actually very difficult for me to make it to the call today. There was so much resistance, and I even wrote, Jamaica, you'll find in your inbox that came up. I was like, I can't make it. And I find it fascinating that this is what I'm bringing. This inner work is so important. This morning I was on a different call. I've been sick all day and I've had so many calls, and this notion of showing up as you are is just something that's taking a lot of work for me, and letting go of any kind of expectation and creating spaces. That's kind of what I'm really curious about, because we're in need of physical spaces in our communities, and then what's the equivalent of that online? And you're doing such a beautiful Jamaica and Caitlin, Katie, I just want to thank you. I've only been able to drop in for a few moments, but there is something here around creating these opportunities for us to come together, and it's and then kind of letting go of it, because there's something around, someone called it the Zoom goddess. I really enjoyed that, because there's sometimes you meet someone in a breakout somewhere and you're like, whoa, this is so incredible. So there's perhaps, yeah, around the prosociality is one is showing up, finding the courage to just show up, let go of whatever agenda you have, show up authentically, and to have a place to even show up to. And so I think we're learning a lot around that, and how we show up on a global level also feeds how we show up in our communities, because the people who find the courage to make it at any time of day to these calls, and connect and find the courage to connect with strangers because they feel so called, have something very special to bring in their local communities. So it's kind of what's alive for me right now. I'm happy to share more about the Experience Prosocial coming next week. We have a special discount for anyone who's at the forum. And I think it will be very fun, because it will be exactly that. It will be a space that we share. And the other one is the repeated, because it's one thing to have it one time, and then it's another thing to make a commitment to show up for an extended period of time and see what happens. So I'll pass it back to you. I'm very curious to hear all the voices in the room, and I don't know how we want to do that.
Dounia, thank you so much. Housekeeping tip, along with Prosocial, Buckminster Fellow also has ongoing programs. Please drop it in the chat. But more importantly, I just want to commend and thank the authenticity, the realness of this work, the real exhaustion and the edge pushing, and like the commitment and what it takes. And for me, I'll just say, and I see your hand as well, Stephen, but I just want to say, I think that that's certainly the invitation is to drop the facade and the well-crafted poise, pitches that we're so used to having to give in certain circumstances, and be unmasked together and be authentic together about what it really takes to trust, to move through trauma and move through competition or whatever separates us, and really lean into this idea of being mutually interdependent and maybe even radically interdependent. What does that really mean? And how do we even begin to approach that if we can't even be like in a space of safety to be honest, to be authentic and bring our full selves? So I really commend you for modeling, like, this is me showing up fully and here's my edges, because I think to me that is one of those both like constraints and trim tab points, to use Bucky's term, of like where we're going to find those shifts in the system to leverage together, is that it's the real authentic, like showing up fully, because only from that, my heart tells me, can we find a way forward together that's of a new paradigm that isn't just replicating the existing constructs and issues and insanity that we're sort of embedded in and trying to learn how to recreate and reforge. So I just want to thank you for being authentic and honest, and how that then opens a space for trust for others to bring that authenticity into a space. And isn't that the foundation for how we're going to even begin to approach, working towards something together? So I just want to say I appreciate what you brought. Faith as well, just jumping in authentically. That's what it really takes, I think. But I see Stephen's hand and I see Brandon's hand, and I know we have a couple of other folks we've invited to speak. So Stephen and Brandon, and then I'm going to take back facilitation and hand that around to some people that.
Yeah, this is very quick. I just want to amplify the point about the inner development goals. I just came back from this conference put on by the author of this book here. His name is Bjorkman, Tomas Bjorkman. This is what he looks like. Anyway, he has a private island, and he invited a bunch of us to go there and visit him. And what I learned is there's a whole global movement afoot called the Inner Development Goals, the IDGs, and that we can't accomplish the SDGs until we at least bring along inner development, the IDGs. And he's put a lot of resources into this, including a website called Emergence, where you can actually develop your own consciousness and your own awareness for free. You can just sign up and take the courses for free. So this, to me, I was amazed. One other thing I want to say is at that island, I met this incredible woman working with him. Her name is Wendy Elliot in the UK. And I was so impressed with her, and we had this open board position. I started talking to her about Kinship Earth, and she's just recently agreed to join our board. So she is directly involved with that interdevelopment work, which is much to do with the Kinship Earth work as well. So I just wanted to pass that on. If anybody wants to see that, I think you would find a great resource there.
Thanks so much for that, Stephen. And yeah, feel free, everybody, to throw your resources, your best resources into the chat. Let's build our knowledge repository right here. Brandon, please go ahead, and then I'll go ahead and call on some other voices.
All right, yeah. So I've been talking to a few people about how these networks can be connected. There's these software tools and apps that they're special in some ways, and like there isn't any one given app or platform that's going to be a monolith for everything that we're trying to do. So we want to encourage more people to get involved in these projects. We want to broaden the reach, especially aligned with what I'm thinking is aligned with the Game B goals and that sort of perspective. This kind of came from what Jim Ruddy's like, we want to get off mighty networks. We want to have some other platforms. So I've talked to Jamaica, I've talked to a few other people. I've attended some of the Collaborative Technology Alliance meetings recently. I'm looking at, okay, in fact, I even asked them at the last meeting, is there a map of showing these different apps and platforms and what they do and how they can be connected to each other and what protocols and integrations? In fact, some people heard rumors, but I guess we don't really know. So I just want to throw it out there. If anybody's aware of this, please let me know and we can work on this together. Or if it's well underway and I just need to stay out of the way, then that's cool as well. I just wasn't sure if there's anything like that. So let me just drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me. We can talk later.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I think it's emergent in that there's lots of maps. We even have, Kayla can put the information about the mapping hackathon that we did last year. It's happening again this year. There's so many different nexuses, but I think as pointed out in previous conversations, there's so much territory to cover and so many dynamic layers to consider and ontologies to consider and who's mapping what element and what do we mean, the translation between maps. So I know John's working on maps. So I think that it's in motion. And I trust that we're going to find synergy between the efforts. But yeah, there are definitely aggregates here, and many of you represent places where we are actively looking at how to have better information flows to see more visibly the whole space together. That's definitely what the Cooperating Manual for Spaceship Earth was an example of. So, there's iterations here of sort of practice rounds beginning to sort of literally like a nervous system sort of make synaptic pathways and then hopefully fortify and myelinate them to become a new pattern groove that's easily accessible rather than the sort of new pattern we're trying to emerge with. But I'd say it's an emergent process, and I'd say it's literally biology at work through us learning how to be way more effective and efficient as part of a symbiotic system. I see Chris's hand. You can jump in, but then I'm going to grab it, and I'm actually going to hand it up to Elliot next from Global Unity, because that term in itself provides rich context to share some of the work you've been doing with Global Unity. But Chris, go ahead and jump in, and then we'll hand that to Elliot.
I just want to make a very brief comment, and I'm interested in your comment about it being emergent, and at the risk of being frightfully nostalgic, I'm going to quote the Buddha. So when we went emergent, we've actually been exploring this experience for a long time. And I think there's one simple unifying concept that man has been looking to, and that is, and in bringing these networks together, I think it speaks to this, which is know thyself, being understood by others. So if we all take if we can create a culture whereby we know ourselves in our own way, we can then enter the conversation of being understood by others. And that's what we're trying to do here. We have egos and complex souls and so forth, but we want to be understood by each other. And this has been an experience that has been understood by humanity for 10,000 years at least. So I don't think it's emergent, it's new, it's rediscovering something traditional and old in a certain sense. And I'm excited by it. I don't want to say any more. I don't want to distract from Elliot, but I just feel there's an opportunity here for us to discover ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Elliot, look forward to hearing your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to first center kind of your emphasis, Jamaica, on kind of as we build these networks, the importance of human connection, and appreciate Dunia's openness. And I got to meet a few folks in the room in New York during Climate Week, and Jordan and I got to connect. And I'm a big fan of the work he does, but one thing I appreciated about us getting to connect was we opened up about some things happening in our personal lives. And I think as we build these networks, it is important because there is so much alignment in our work, and that's wonderful. But it's that human connection that really builds trust. And I was speaking with Lori Madoff and Jake, who's in the room, just talking about how anyone that I've met through Jamaica and Katie, like, instantly has my admiration, because I know I admire them so much that the curation that they offer to anyone that they trust kind of extends that trust. And I think that human connection, building real bonds is really vital. And that extends to showing up very honestly and openly, and not making it all about the work. So for a number of folks I've already met, and I'm very privileged to know, but for those who haven't gotten to connect, so just a quick overview of what global unity is. We ask, imagine humanity were really working as one cohesive organism. Where's the platform that facilitates that? It doesn't exist, so we have to build it. Little caveat there, so many of us are building that in our own ways. But platforms and tools and tech will never be enough, as we all know. And so global unity has two branches: an ecosystem of platforms and a movement building strategy designed to get to the critical mass and cultural shift necessary. And love to share more. Many of the folks on this call are already part of what we're calling our Wisdom Council. We have a strategy for scaling that's based on the idea that if you go up to the average person and say, I've got a plan for uniting humanity, to most people sounds a little out there. You've got someone like Elon Musk behind you, even though we might have questions around likability or trustability, the possibility space opens up. And so rather than try to get a Musk, imagine 1,000 folks like yourselves, change makers, social entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, artists, activists, all behind it. It would kind of have that same super credible impact. And so we're working to get to that 1,000 before we launch publicly, where we kind of activate the second pillar of our strategy, which is to crowdsource a new country in service of everyone everywhere. Rather than take up any more time on that, I thought just on the topic of networking networks, again, trust is really important, but we've tried to approach this in a few different ways outside of just the kind of global unity strategy. And one is simply introductions. When we've met someone who's got a network of farms and see that they're struggling with soil remediation, we happen to know someone in our network who's got an innovative approach to regenerating soil. Just an introduction can be really a public good. We wrote an article called Weaving as a Public Good. So weaving those webs one-to-one is one way to connect those networks. We've also, we spoke earlier on this call about the need for cartography, mapping out what groups exist. Brandon spoke about the technology side of mapping out, but what groups exist, what specialties exist, what needs exist. And if we can just map out what needs exist and what resources exist and do that matchmaking, I think we can close a lot of gaps. Another piece we've done through what we started something called Weaver DAO, the idea of trying to strengthen the natural connection process that's happening. And we run impact niche masterminds. So bringing together leaders in various impact spaces, very much like this, not just today, but this whole week, thanks to OFC is, but trying to bring them across different impact niches. So the one we run most is impact measurement, reward, and incentive mastermind. There are lots of folks who work on carbon capture or work on solar storage, or our term is gamifying goodwill, but the idea of rewarding positive behaviors, but they're not always talking to each other outside of their kind of silos. And so trying to bring leaders within these spaces together to knowledge share and to network and to meet each other and to collaborate. So facilitating, what a public good we're all benefiting from today, from Jamaica and Katie putting this together, right? And so doing this kind of thing, whether it be as formal as an organized event or something as informal as an introduction, I think is really brilliant. And the last thing I'll say, Jamaica spoke earlier today to the importance of translating. So many of us are such experts. We're like, my old school world, black belts in our field. We've maybe forgotten how to speak to the white belt, the person who isn't in the impact space, isn't in the soil remediation space, and whatever our niche is. And so finding ways to translate these very important ideas into language that the everyday person understands. And I think that's actually only half of the solve, because even if we can do that, even, of course, white papers and PowerPoints and articles will never be enough, because they speak to the mind. If we're really going to build a better world, we need to build a global movement. If we're going to build a global movement, it's got to be because we also speak to the heart. So finding ways to engage art and story and narrative and community gathering is really vital. So just a few of the ideas we've been thinking about, a few of the ways we've been thinking about how we bond networks and strengthen the bonds that already exist.
Thanks for that so much, and I'm starting to feel the flow of conversation to some other pieces and parts, but I'll just acknowledge that the facilitative space, or something that's happening, and even my nervous system right now of, well, here we are doing it. Like there's this what do we need to do to network? And then I sort of drop that sort of mental mindscape facade that's like, well, you're doing it. Like you're becoming the thing. It's happening everywhere. It's lighting up in all these pockets and conversations, and just keep finding the edges and weaving to the center, and then sending that back out to the edges and weaving to the center, and you're becoming it. There's something of an intelligence that's so much wiser than I'll say me, that's actively weaving through us. And it's more about just sort of allowing and aligning the fact that if you're showing up and paying attention with presence, and like we've all been saying here, doing that inner work, and then how does that connect to what you do externally and the work you do? I just want to celebrate that. I think it's happening, but it's something that the more consciousness we bring to it, I think the more purpose we bring to it, maybe the more that we can help participate with whatever is happening through us to sort of get a little more efficient each time at it. But thank you, Elliot. And I'm going to do a couple of things. I do see your hand, but I'm going to do a couple more rounds here because there's a little pattern flow that was starting to happen. Donna, I'm going to hand it to you. And then Reiki, I think you have some pieces here that I want to name and have you bring in with hypha seeds. But I felt Donna first, and then over to Reiki, and then I have some other hits that are starting to happen from a few other people we've invited. And then Gaia Union, I'm not sure of your name, but I'll make sure we get you in the loop there in the conversation too. Donna, why don't you go ahead and take the next.
Okay. Great, good to be here. I also came in kind of exhausted at the end of a long day, but there's many resonant themes that are coming up. We're all learning. We don't have all the answers. And yet there's a lot of things that have been here all along, and some of this is about uncovering those things. It's about patterns, and I would like to talk more about governance. And if you know anything about me, I've spent some time with you, Jamaica, and Caitlin, and several people in here. And I like to talk about the human side, the meta-humanness, the dancing with monsters, the paradox, because there's a lot of that comes up thematically. I'd like to do something that I'm normally not as comfortable doing, if you let me. And it is to share a few slides to focus on governance, very briefly, hopefully colorful, and you can shut me up at any time if this is not resonating, but I'd like to, I'm very fond of the word and. So it's and everything that's been said here. And we also are, I think, wrestling with ways of bringing in some governance frameworks with enough fluidity that allows us to set some context for the very kind of behavior that people are wanting to see more in the world. And also at some level, the other thing I want to just say that I resonate with is, in some ways, the new paradigm is already here. It's just messy, it's uneven, not everybody knows it, and there's different interpretations of it. So if you wouldn't mind, I will screen share. Is that okay? Because I feel like I'm breaking the pattern here, and normally I don't do this. I'm not into slides. In fact, I discourage them. So if you'll bear with me, I will go out of my. All right.
I gave you the floor. Trust happens here. Go for it. What you
Go out
got?
of my own comfort zone, which I really can. Now where is the? Hold on. I'm trying to find the. Where is it? I lost. Okay, I've got to move. Oh, okay. My own. There we go. That should be better. It's loading. All right, here we go. So, tech. A lot of this is, decades of work that has led up to really trying to understand all these patterns. And Unstitution is working in that space between building collaborative impact coalitions, bringing people together across business, government, civil society. And we started out by asking this question about governance. Is there some way of setting ourselves up at the outset in a legal sense in order to get that scaffolding in place? And that is why we searched long and hard. We felt we could not, or preferred not, to fall into some of the conventional patterns that are keeping us stuck. And there's still a lot of experimenting and learning that's going on here. But we did end up going with what some of you may be a little aware of, is something called fair shares commons, which is a way of bringing people together within a true commons, within an ecosystem. And I'll move from here to, why am I seeing all these faces? Okay.
I just lost sound. Donna, you're on mute. Oh, you're still on mute, Donna. Am I the only one who can't hear? Just
Have I been on mute all this time?
No, just for the last second. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Tech is really my favorite thing. Anyway, it was a very helpful process for us to, first of all, get very clear about what is our driving purpose. Why are we here in the world? And for us, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal that I think many of us share. We sure as heck can't do it alone. That's why we need the commons and multiple commons. And ours is to reboot society's operating system. And everything I've been hearing and that we've been talking about is, yep, there's a need for some major shift there. The governing framework that we were looking for is, in this case, it enables us to put in place the things that will enable and protect some of the critical legal requirements, the givens, the assets, the IP, the things that often cause us to struggle and stumble, to just define, in a sense, it's the minimum critical specifications, and to define some stewardship roles. What are those roles? And recognizing that may need to change over time. We might need other stewardship roles as we go along. So when we first started looking into this, first we thought this is going to be very complex and complicated. Gosh, I don't think we want to go there. And then as we got into it, we discovered that it really isn't that complex, and that we were really able to develop something that was conducive to the kind of work that we were engaged in. And the subject here that I think is worth referencing is trust is so important. And there's all different kinds of trust, but this is systemic trust. It's the kinds of things around what is it that we need to trust people to be able to do within the context of our work here, as opposed to just this loose word that often ends up being just a person-to-person thing. It sets the context for that trust. And I heard referenced earlier Game B. And this is a way to actually be the change we want to see in the world, not waiting for it to happen, but to actually have a bit of a scaffolding that enables us to bake those principles into our governing legal framework. It's adaptable. And then the other thing is it enables us over time, based on the differentiated coalition work, to develop other governance frameworks for other coalitions that we catalyze and convene. Now this is not letting me move. Oh, okay, hang on. So what we've, hang on, clarity. Here we go. So it's all a journey, and I think everybody's been talking about this being a journey. And some of our observations have been, we all need to learn how to truly collaborate. There's different kinds of collaboration at different stages of whatever the work needs to be, done. And networking is great, but we're often seeing what we call not working, in the sense of great conversations, and then it sort of evaporates. Mind you, there's lots of good things that are happening, the ripple effect, things that are beyond what we might see, which is all great. On the other hand, if we want to accelerate the pace and take on some mission critical work that our current organizations and institutions can't do, and that some of our networking can't accomplish in an entirely emergent way, this is where catalyzing, convening collaborative impact coalitions, which really depend on real learning exchange and actually rigorous research. So the research that was also mentioned by Prosocial, this is the kind of work that we all need to continue so that we can learn about those patterns, and so they do become replicable, not in a cookie cutter sense, but in the sense of, here are some shortcuts. We don't all have to go through some of the painful learning that we've been doing for all of these decades. So that's really what that's about. And the governance, having the clarity, enables us to ensure return on investment and in return on impact, both. So it's the issue of accountability. So I think what I'm trying to raise here, and a little bit provocative, it's collaboration with some teeth for some of the time, recognizing that the human stuff, the person-to-person stuff, the things that happen with us when we are working together on the ground, there's nothing that will take the place of that. So here, I want you to hear that too when I share this, is it's an and, it's not an either or, but I think we've got more work to do on the governance. And so the bottom line is amplifying citizen-empowered impact in society, because because the reality is we do have nearly 8 billion people on planet Earth, and we're looking for ways of, I'm now giving you there we go. We're looking for ways of reaching more people beyond these places where we show up and we love each other and we agree with each other, and increasingly invite more people in, but in ways that Elliot said, where we start talking, not just in our language and the ways that we typically speak, but in ways that other people can relate, that extends those ripples, because everybody's feeling this sense of urgency. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I've done this for too long, but so that we can pick up the pace, because the urgency is there. So it's a dance. It's emergence, and it's by design. And we don't know how to do it. We don't have the answers, but there's a lot of answers out there in the world. There's a lot of wisdom. And then if we truly co-create, we're going to discover some breakthroughs, some things that no one of us would have really figured out. And that's really what all of this is about. And I will stop there. I already feel like I've gone on for too long. But yeah, governance, we've got to get better at this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Donna. Yeah, I'm going to weave a little there and just acknowledge that one of the things Katie and I talked about when creating the Open Future Forum was, earlier this summer had been this concept of emerge. And, we saw, what does emerge mean? I remember walking away, I didn't get to join, but she did. And a lot of others of you did. What do we mean by emergence? And one of the things that really stood out for me is emergence doesn't happen in a vacuum. That emergence is actually within well-held containers of context, and that through well-held containers of context, that's where you actually create the mechanism for emergence to flow and for life to sort of be co-creative and dynamic and ever changing, it doesn't happen in a void, it happens in context. And so we talked about holding these containers for the kind of context setting that then we let go and allow what's within that to be a truly like dynamic co-arisal of what's true in that moment arising. And the more that I play with this of like, okay, how do you bring that as a facilitator into practice or as a community member or whatever other hat I'm going to wear? It's really dynamic, but the more that I'm paying attention to it, the more that I'm learning these like, oh, subtleties of what emergence really is and what it actually means to be co-creative and emergent, and where we don't do that well, and where if we get it right, holy moly, like the funnel of just true natural potentiation that comes through that space is really an unstoppable force that I'm all about figuring out how else to cultivate. There's a few voices in Stack. I'm going to actually hand it to Reiki because I want to hear about the HIFA governance model and some of the work they're doing. I'm going to loop back in Felipe. I see Lauren's hand. I still want to get to Jordan, and I want to make sure we get to Elizabeth. And we're going to see how many voices we can get in the next 15 minutes, but I know we can do it. So with that, Reiki, I'm going to hand it to you, and then it'll be Felipe, Lauren, Jordan, and Elizabeth, and we'll see where that takes us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to attempt to talk fairly quickly then to make the best use of our time.
You're good at it. Oh, where'd you go, friend? Reiki, just making sure you're still there. Oh, you're paused. You're on mute, buddy.
Life says slow down. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. Sacred pause.
I'm back. Okay. Yeah, so I was just congratulating you and thanking you for the space you're holding today. It's so marvelous. It's a joy to be a part of it. Jeff, you sparked an inquiry. You talked about the collective organism that we're manifesting together and becoming part of right now. I think that's really alive. Jamaica, two other things you spoke to that I'm really inspired by is who do we have to be and where do we need to be approaching these, problems, situations from? What lens and perspective we need to have? I think you're speaking to that. So I know you're calling on me to come in and talk about the practical tools and the technology we've been building for however many years now to enable us to build new decentralized financial governance, economic systems, kind of like how we can start redesigning our scaled coordination systems, that whole kind of meta field. But what's really inspired me lately is about 1.5 years ago, my wife and I, we got pregnant. And in that moment, we're like, oh, wait, we need to radically rethink life. We did a beautiful earth medicine ceremony. And I made a commitment to let go of everything I was doing, trust flow, and let that guide me to the most inspired way I could be showing up in the Renaissance right now for myself and my family and the future generations that are coming right now. Because we wanted to be, living in the civilization before we brought in kids. So that was kind of when I'm like, oh, need to move faster. So I let everything go and let synchronicity, take its spin. So where I'm at now and what's most exciting and alive for me that I want to speak to is, the technology that I don't think we're utilizing as much as we can be. And that's rites of passage. And that's designing these very consciously inspired and engineered as well processes to help us up level who we are and how we see ourselves and how we relate to ourselves, but then how we're relating to Earth, in particular land bases of Earth and all the other beautiful non-human species we're still sharing this place with. So where I'm standing right now and where synchronicity has taken me is a 100-acre campus. We're about to extend it to 120 where we can have 200 people. So we're going to do it in cohorts of 144. So I'm going to talk to you about a potential rite of passage to help you get the concept in the shortest form here. It's a 3-month journey. This is our rite of passage from one civilization to the next. It's how we build the networks. It's how we get deep enough and how we have the time to actually get deep enough to really build the relationships and the network's foundation so that we can scale. So this is DNA level, recreating we're working with here. So the traditional rite of passage process follows separation. The 3 phases are separation, liminality, and then integration. Liminality being that space, that really, really juicy space where the newness comes through. So separation, the first month is that. It's your time to actually slow down. So some people will choose not to talk for that month. There'll be a lot of fasting, a whole lot of different medicine ceremonies going on for people who feel inspired by that. There'll be garden walks and kayaking and a lot of hiking and connecting with Gaia and reestablishing that relationship with the earth and what she needs and recultivating the idea of who we are. So this is our space to really say, who am I? And really get deep into that before the second month where we show up and say who we are. And maybe these aren't months. Use this as a concept for all the organizations we're creating here. Like, how do we create rites of passages into our networks where people really feel like they belong? So, if the month model is too much for you, just bear with me. The second month is then about the we space, what's emerging between us. What is that emergent pattern? We need to hold space for that emergence. Emergence, if we're running around using the capitalistic models of just do, think, market cycle, etc., we're not going to be able to really let it, what needs to emerge, the new organism, right? So the second month is really about letting that come through in the space between us when we're showing up as our real authentic selves of who we need to be for this emergence to happen, who we need to be for this new civilization. And there will be a lot of facilitated, we space practices. Then the third month is, okay, we've seen an image. We know what's emerged. Now, how do we concretize it? What does the network actually look like? That's where governance comes in, the tokens, legal structure, all of that emerges around the image that was born in the second month from that space of deep connection, So all of the things that we're building then are in service to that image and that greater thing we all know. And then I think this is what gives the foundation for self-organization to really work. Having a DAO and being able to issue tokens and vote on things, that's not self-organization, that's chaos, that's depression, and it's annoying. Can't do that. Self-organization is we all see the image and then we know our role in it. We know everyone else's role. There's a deep knowing there, and then we just do the next inspired thing we need to do. And then we avoid all this burnout we keep seeing as we all think we need to do everything. That's not true. We think that because we see the organism, but think we have to be that whole organism. Rather than saying, no, I'm a cell in that organism. How do I just need to show up? What is my role? So the output of this, 3-month journey is really deep understanding, knowing of our space, who we are, how we're showing up in this new civilization. And then from there, sure, we build all the Haifa DAO tools and all the stuff on top of it. But without that, rite of passage precursor, I don't think much else happens. So my focus is this physical campus, starting to host that, doing a 3-month next this upcoming summer in North America. And I'm only telling this group this because a lot of you I would love to see there, because the idea is we're inviting 144 people that represent all the different organs our regenerative renaissance needs to be an entirely new civilization, have the whole package. We're all carrying so many pieces. So if we all come together, see the whole image together, then we walk out of this 3-month process in the new civilization. This is our rite of passage into the new worlds. And then this is our introduction to it. And then we get to design these beautiful ceremonies and rites of passage that we get to have for us walking into our new civilizations. Like, why don't we want this beautiful story, to serve as the foundation? And we get to create it together. So that's what's most alive with me right now. And then, of course, we can get into all the tools later. But there's so many other voices, and I would feel remiss if I didn't get to hear them. So I'll pause all of this now. If anyone else is equally inspired by the idea of co-creating our own rite of passage and co-buying a resort to be able to hold space for that and all of these things that are emerging right now, reach out to me. We can go from there. Thanks, Jamaica, for holding this.
Yeah, thanks you so much, Ricky. And I did put in the chat here, Haifa, because you also have tools to try to enable a different kind of decentralized yet interconnected governance patterns. And so for those of you looking for some of those structures in the digital world that help enable this concept to emerge, please do check out Haifa if you haven't already, because I think it's got some really key pieces to how to leverage the tool of technology for this evolution that we're talking about. And I appreciate going to rites of passage. I'll geek out with you later on how important I think this is and how essential. We can't skip over that part of the conversation. But what I'm going to do now is go with the flow that we've outset. So Felipe, you've been waiting wonderfully. You're up. Lauren, I know you put some things in the chat, but feel free to exponentiate on that. And then Elizabeth, we're going to go to you, and then we'll see if we have some time for Jordan as well. Felipe, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, family. Well, keeping this thread that Jamaica left and Reiki as well, what I feel to share is that we as a global family needs these rites of passage to, as Lauren was saying, to really take the space to listen, share, and connect. And the best way to do this and to honor this network of networks and like go is to really think in how are we moving in our own proposals, networks, and maybe reflect that we might need to take more time to actually to this purpose of weaving and knowing each other and not just like keep moving on our directions. So actually when I received the question in the subscription, it's what I feel is we just need to keep doing this. So I don't want to go very deep, but just really keep the like a cycle, like a cyclic meeting that we can really keep the rhythm. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Felipe. All right, Lauren, did you want to add any punctuated points onto that?
I just want to honor the wisdom in the room and to recognize that, you know, we don't know who's here and what rites of passage they've already gone through and what level of depth of experience and wisdom is being held. And so, yeah, just to hold space to honor that and not assume we have any of the answers. That's just my 2 cents, so passing it along.
Yeah, I'll plus that. That's what felt really good to share too, is the sort of like we're just learning and feeling our way through something, and the more honest and authentic we are about that, I think the more we're actually going to learn together. So I really value and appreciate the wisdom we're bringing in, also the unknown and the mystery of something that is, like we said, emerging, that we can't know fully, and that's okay to relax into the trust of that. I think that takes us to Elizabeth, and I'd love for you to share some of your thoughts about this.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for following your impulse to be here today. Jamaica and Katie put tons of work into creating this, and just really want to honor the two of you and everyone else that contributed. But each one of us said yes to being here. And so just really want to thank everybody for that. One of the advantages of going last is that you get to hear everybody. One of the disadvantages is that everybody has already said what I wanted to say. And so I kind of find myself listening to, I just love where we've been taken in this conversation and the depth of this emergence that we're speaking of. And I would actually take us deeper and suggest that we're actually becoming. I almost feel like we're becoming a new species, and that we are following an evolutionary imperative. Like, we don't evolve unless we have to. And we've been pushed to the point where we really have to evolve, and we have to do it quickly. And the only way we're going to do it is together. And so that is crux to what we have to figure out here. And we're doing it. And this morning we started it in our breakout groups with the suggestion that I feel, and I'm feeling it in my body, like my nervous system is just vibrating at this moment as I'm speaking. I feel like we've already reached the critical mass. I feel that we've spoken about critical mass, that we don't have to influence everybody. We just have to influence the influencers that will get to the influencers, right? And I'm feeling that here in what we're doing here today and tomorrow and the next day, and invite us to dive even deeper and remember that we're conspiring, and conspiring means to breathe together, right? Even though we're on Zoom, we're still breathing the same atmosphere. And there are, in listening to what's not been said, there's a few concepts that I would like to pull in here, but I would invite us to take a moment to actually breathe together, to just take 3 breaths right now and really feel the energy in your body and what this day has brought to you. And recognize that, again, we're speaking to our water. Water is the medium of our collective intelligence. If 99% of the molecules in our body are water molecules, if we have consciousness, it's because we are the consciousness of water becoming life itself. And so in this moment, let's just really breathe into that greatest truth of all, because without liquid water on this planet and the light of the sun, we would well, just really liquid water, our sweet spot in the solar system, we would resemble Mars or Venus, right? We are here because our water is liquid and fluid and spirals in an implosive magic that we're just beginning to tap into. We have yet to even begin to imagine where this level of consciousness could take us as a species. So as you're breathing, just feel the water in your body, feel the moisture in your mouth, and remember that there's only one water on Earth. If there's only one water on Earth, there's only one life. And in this breath, we can dissolve the delusion of separation that has existed on the planet for who knows how long. And as we're holding this space of breathing together, I would like us to invite in the concept, and I believe it's more like the glue that holds the universe together, of quantum love. That what we're doing, if we can do this with the attitude in every cell of our body of quantum love, and recognizing that love takes us beyond all things, and we can get through anything if we can hold that quantum love. As much as our communications may be challenging, we can go through those challenges if we always remember to return to quantum love. And quantum is that the observer has an influence on the observed, right? In terms of what really takes love to a quantum level. And I believe that water is fully quantum. The other thing that I haven't heard yet, and I really want to bring it into the room because I believe it is key in a way that we can't even imagine, are our youth. That all we're speaking to today, we're speaking for the youth because it is their future that's on the line. So really want to honor our youth, our children, our children's children's great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren, and know that what we do here today creates the world that they will be living in. We are their future, not the other way around. So I honor us, I honor all of us all over the planet that are feeling this, this vibrant awakening in ourselves. And it comes together when we come together. And the more we care about our world, we'll take care of what we care about. And so the more we just cherish the world and cherish each other as if our lives depend on each other, because they do. Simply they do. And when we remember that, all things are possible. So thank you.
I know that we're at time. Jordan, I'd love any 2 cents you have. We still want to wrap. We might just go 5 minutes over, so we make sure to sort of wrap this thoughtfully since it's the last of our day. Jordan, anything particular you want to share? And then I'm going to hand it to Katie. And we're going to wrap today's session knowing that this is not an ending of a conversation, but a continuum, and obviously one that we need to keep having. And as noted in the chat, we need to keep going into other terrain that didn't get covered today, but that I appreciate is still here by the reflections that have been shared in the chat and through all of your shares. So very complex and dynamic conversation to have. Jordan, do you want to add anything to that? And then we'll hand it to Katie to do a good wrap for today.
Elizabeth, thank you for that beautiful prayer. Let's see. I think the biggest thing that I'm learning after a lot of years and a lot of investments, building physical infrastructure, building legal infrastructure, helping fund the technology infrastructure that we thought was needed in the room, bringing together $10 or $20 million worth of work from the AC industry on process and how you facilitate coordinated delivery of nested hierarchy of goals across distributed teams, all that good stuff. my realization is basically, I think, right on the emergent line of this conversation, which is that there's a far deeper reason that we're not working together as closely as we should right now. And it's has nothing to do with legal or governance structure. It has nothing to do with technology. It has nothing to do with process. And it's a deeper issue of spirit and heart that Elizabeth was just speaking to. So I think that's maybe the challenge that I would leave us with, is just to say that I'm here in service of what's trying to emerge through us all. And I know that we're all risking killing that emergence by creating all these named things, but I want to just let each of you know that I'm deeply here in service of the same thing that you're moving and in service of. And if there's anything that I can do to help, or we can do to collaborate, the beautiful Indigenous women that speak with me about these things are constantly talking to me about the difference between deep cellular level cooperation and interexistence and this casual intellectual assent to how we can maybe work together, govern ourselves better. And I'm growing ever deeply more convinced that another 6 or 12 months of kind of intellectually thinking about how we might work together or govern ourselves is not going to work. So I guess just to offer an invitation of, I'm here in service of the same thing you are. And if there's those out there that are looking to connect more deeply, more cellularly, more structurally, and really see what it's going to take to move together, I'm here in service, and I'd love to learn and help and grow with you. So thanks, Katie and Jamaica, and congratulations. It's so fun after starting with you guys in February, I guess, a year and a half ago. Amazing to come to the summit. Congratulations on all the amazing things that you guys are doing.
Thanks, Jordan. I happen to know in the space there are a lot of models and methods and legal structures and finance and governance structures. So maybe we find another opportunity to kind of put those in the center and play with them a little bit. But I'm going to hand that to Katie now to wrap us up, knowing again that we're not really ending a conversation, but capping this particular version of it so that we can continue on. So many of you have been here all day with us, and we're so grateful to have you. Katie, go ahead and bring us home, lady.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting to sort of every time we enter this particular type of conversation, we enter it with a slightly different sort of depth and vantage. And this one certainly had its own character to it today. And I thank you all. I'll radically presence that I from my brain right now. So hopefully I'm being coherent. So I'm going to go soon. But I do want to name that I think that this is just, as I think some of you have named in the chat, just starting to scratch the surface of what is a much wider and deeper inquiry in how we truly work through the uncomfortable, how we truly work through sort of both tactical and ideological and spiritual divides. I think there will be more opportunities to engage in that discussion over the next 2 days. But I also want to name, as Jamaica just nodded to, that there are so many of you in this group, even that are networking networks and that are doing the hard work of weaving between them and in sort of radical partnership with one another and living some of that interoperability. And so I do want to encourage the continued sort of opportunity to tap into that tremendous resource that is one another. And so we did open up a space on the Open Impact platform that we're all a member, that you all have been invited to invite kind of ongoing dialogues outside of this one. But I think part of it isn't dialogue, it's doing. And again, I think there is so much doing happening here in each of these networks and between them. And so I look forward to continuing to identify direct examples of how we can start to model that and learn from it and kind of communicate our learnings and make mistakes and communicate that back to one another too. And so we'll do our best to communicate opportunities that we see for that weaving. We do have a community managers group in the platform as well, that's meant to be a space to invite some of those candid discussions too around the challenges that we're having within our own organizing. And so we'll be sure to follow up with you through that context as well.
And again, thank you so much. We'll be sharing the recording from this session and any other next steps as they emerge. And open to your suggestions around those opportunities or next steps too. Thank you all, and we'll hope to see many of you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Some of you were all day. You were in it with us, and so appreciate it. You're on your way to that gold star, I promised, if you attend all the session days. But for those of you who dropped in, your presence is invaluable and just precious to us. And I genuinely feel so honored. And I'm excited about tomorrow. I'm excited to get into regen ag and food systems and nutrition. And I'm excited about eco restoration and sort of climate conversations on Thursday. So come back and join us as you can. And thank you for joining us today. And we'll be following up in all sorts of fun ways. So if you all just want to give a fond farewell, some people it's good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night. And just, yeah, thank you so much, community, for being. Thanks for this good work.
Both so much for hosting. It's wonderful. Great to meet everybody.
Thanks here, friends.
See ya.
Good job. Well done.
Tomorrow, come back and play with us some more.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everybody. See more of you soon. Onwards we go.